Palestinian prisoners discussed the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, but as yet no decision has been taken. Faisal al-Husseini says more details are necessary before prisoners can decide whether to continue their hunger strike. In Cairo, Israeli and Palestinian teams finished their latest round of talks and acknowledged they will not complete their work by the July 1st target date. Foreign Minister Shimon Peres accuses Likud Chairman Netanyahu of presenting a stolen document to the Knesset, but also of deceit. U.S. President Bill Clinton is to meet later today with the Israeli and Syrian chiefs of staff. Egyptian President Mubarak threatens to take actions against Sudan if it continues to operate against Egypt, and the weather outlook, cooler. The Ministerial Committee on the Release of Palestinian Prisoners has discussed the freeing of hundreds of Palestinians in advance of the second stage agreement, which is expected to be announced in the coming days. A member of the committee, Police Minister Moshe Shachal, explained the decision to reporter David Ze'ev.
We got a report from the IDF and the jail authority about the number of the prisoners, those who are waiting for their trial, and those who support the peace process, and of course the criminal prisoners within the jurisdiction of the jail authority. All in all, we have about 5,500 prisoners. Out of them, about 15,000 waiting for their trials. They are not prisoners yet, but they are detainees. So we have about another 1,000 criminal prisoners. All in all, I would say the security prisoners is about 3,000 who are being jailed in the jail authority and with the IDF.
Well, in fact, we are just 2 days away from the July 1st target date. Do you expect a decision on a release within the next couple of days?
No, I don't think so. The process itself will take time. And in any event, there will be a need to go in details. But I think that if there will be an agreement during the time of the agreement, probably there will be some agreement about the prisoners that will be based on the principles accepted by the Ministerial Committee, and they will be conveyed to the Palestinians.
Would you say outright that anyone guilty of murder will not be released?
I think that will be right. Our recommendations don't include those who murdered other persons.
Police Minister Moshe Shachal. Faisal al-Husseini says Palestinian prisoners need details of exactly who will be released and when before they make a decision on whether to continue their hunger strike. Meanwhile, the hunger strike is continuing. Reporter Mark Weiss asked Faisal al-Husseini, who is himself on Solidarity hunger strike, how he reacts to this morning's decision by the Ministerial Committee, this discussion by the Ministerial Committee to release Palestinian prisoners.
First of all, I would like to say that the one who must decide about that is the prisoners themselves who are in the hunger strike. But if you are asking me, I believe one of the main questions, the main problems have not been answered, or it was answered negatively. I mean, the decision that no one who was involved in killing will be released means that anyone who has Jewish blood on his hands, he will not be released, and this makes the question another time, if this file will not close, would we open the files of the Israelis who have blood, Palestinian blood on their hands?
When will a decision be taken as to whether the hunger strike will continue?
I believe that this matter will be discussed in the committee inside the prison, and for sure there will be in need of more information about what they mean by hundreds. That is what they mean by hundreds, and who are the people who will be released? Are they the people who are waiting for another several days or several weeks to be released, or several years, or they are talking about people who really have a long time to stay in the prison?
For the time being, are you continuing your Solidarity hunger strike?
Yes, until now we are continuing that until we will hear from the prison itself.
Faisal al-Husseini. In Cairo, Israeli and Palestinian teams finished their latest round of talks today, acknowledging that they could not complete their work by Saturday's target date. The head of the Israeli delegation, Major General Oren Shachor, said it was a good round and that the two sides would resume the talks next week in the Egyptian capital. Asked why the teams had failed to meet the July 1st date, General Shachor replied that there are a lot of technical issues which still have to be discussed. He did not elaborate, nor did he say if any agreements were near. The head of the Palestinian delegation, Jamil Tarifi, was expected to speak to reporters later. 4 more members of Hamas, arrested after a booby-trapped donkey and cart blew up near Neve de Kalim in the Gaza Strip, have been released by the Palestinian police. This leaves 4 suspects still in detention after the attack, which took place as an Israeli army patrol was passing, but in which no one, apart from the suicide bomber himself, was hurt. The Hamas newspaper Al Watan is to appear again after being closed down on orders from Yasser Arafat. The paper was banned 2 months ago when it published an editorial criticizing the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian police force. But after the leader of the Islamic movement in Israel, Sheikh Abdullah Nimr Darwish, and Dr. Ahmed Tibi intervened, Arafat decided to give Al Watan another chance. You're tuned to Kol Yisrael, the voice of Israel, Jerusalem. Foreign Minister Shimon Peres is accusing Likud chairman Benjamin Netanyahu of not only presenting a stolen document to the Knesset yesterday on supposed concessions to Syria, but also of deceit. Speaking on Kol Yisrael this morning, Peres said Netanyahu's actions are even more serious because they come even as negotiations are taking place. The foreign minister repeated that the document did not represent instructions handed down to Army Chief General Amnon Lipkin-Shatak, but rather is only one of many documents prepared within the IDF. In response, Netanyahu said the government was caught lying when it first denied the existence of the document and now is trying to cover it up. Knesset member Netanyahu says he opposes investigating army officers or other personnel concerning their handing over documentation. The Likud chairman said that former Prime Minister Menachem Begin had opposed such investigations and that if he becomes premier, he would do the same. In the meantime, members of the Labour Party have filed a complaint with Jerusalem police against Netanyahu for disclosing a military document and damaging state security. The complainants are also demanding from the chairman of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee that he suspend Netanyahu from committee meetings. Likud Knesset member David Mena has filed a complaint with the Knesset Ethics Committee against Prime Minister Rabin and Foreign Minister Peres. Mena accuses them of deceiving the Knesset when they, at first, denied the existence of the document and accused Netanyahu of making it up, until it turned out that it was, in fact, real. Labour Knesset member Eli Dayan had already submitted a complaint with the Ethics Committee against Netanyahu over the affair. Syria says it is encouraged by today's scheduled meeting between U.S. President Bill Clinton and the Syrian and Israeli chiefs of staff in Washington. The state-run media in Damascus said the planned meeting showed that the U.S. administration is putting its full weight behind the talks, which began Tuesday. A correspondent sent by the BBC to Damascus says he was surprised to find that most residents want peace and normalized relations with Israel far more than their leaders do. The reporter says that many Syrians already see peace as a fait accompli and are anticipating economic dividends which relations with Israel would bring. On the other hand, Kol Yisrael monitor Michael Gordus says the BBC reporter found opposition among the Syrian leadership to making fast progress in the peace process. Syrian Vice President Abdul Halim Khaddam told the correspondent that those who think peace will bring money into the region are fooling themselves. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has threatened Sudanese leaders that he will take strong steps against Sudan if it continues to operate against Egypt and him personally. As a first measure, President Mubarak this morning expelled 70 Sudanese police posted at the border between the two countries. Mubarak said he carried out the expulsion after the Sudanese had taken control over Egyptian guest houses in the capital of Khartoum. In an address this morning, the Egyptian president said the man who planned Monday's assassination attempt is a Sudanese citizen. The Sudanese army spokesman told state-run radio that Sudanese soldiers will defend their positions to the death if the Egyptians attacked on the disputed Red Sea border. Sudan said yesterday that Egyptian forces killed 2 policemen and wounded 7 in an attack on a Sudanese border post. Egypt maintains the Sudanese initiated the skirmish and said 6 people were wounded. The border policeman was shot and seriously wounded this morning in a firefight with terrorists in Hebron. A Hamas fugitive was killed in the exchange. More details from reporter Mark Weiss. Mark.
The border policeman seriously wounded in this morning's clash belonged to the Border Police Special Anti-Terror Unit. The clash occurred at 5 o'clock this morning at the northern entrance to Hebron. The border policeman was evacuated to Jerusalem's En-Kerem hospital for treatment. The Hamas fugitive Tahar Kafisha, who was killed in the firefight, headed an Izzadin al-Qassam cell that operated in Hebron over the last 2 years. The fugitive headed the cell after escaping about 2 years ago from Dahriya jail. IDF forces destroyed 2 buildings in the area with bulldozers where they believed 2 other Hamas terrorists were hiding. Kafisha was in possession of a Kalashnikov rifle and a pistol. He is believed to be responsible for a number of attacks on Israeli targets in the Hebron area over the last few years. These are our initial reports from Hebron, and we'll bring you a more detailed report in our evening bulletin.
An armed robbery took place around midday at a bank discount branch in Tel Aviv. The thief held a pistol as he made off with the money on a mini-bike. A police search on the ground and in the air, though through the use of helicopter, is underway. In Haifa, an attempt to rob a bank was foiled this morning. Two thieves entered a Bank Leumi branch in the city and handed a note to one of the tellers demanding that she hand over money. The teller stalled, and the would-be thieves panicked and fled without the money. Police say they're carrying out searches in pursuit of the pair. Tel Aviv police say they have arrested a suspect in Sunday's robbery at a Bank Leumi branch in Jaffa. The 37-year-old man was said to be possessing drugs, which he had purchased just a few hours after he robbed the bank. Dozens of volunteers helping policemen and trackers have resumed searching in the north for a missing elderly man, Habib Ben Abu, aged 81, who disappeared after the Lag BaOmer celebrations at Mount Meron 2 months ago. He has not been seen since. In the Galilean village of Dir el-Hana, a wedding turned into a riot in which one person was seriously injured and 5 arrested. As the marriage procession was making its way through the village, a rival clan appeared on the scene, blocking the road, damaging cars, and smashing windows of houses. When the fighting was over, the police took up a position in the village to prevent another flare-up if the 2 hostile extended families start fighting again. Israelis will be working less starting next week. The cut is by 1 hour as part of an agreement signed by private employers and brings the work week down to an official 44 hours. A German court yesterday began hearing a compensation claim by 30 relatives of the Israeli victims of the Munich Olympics terrorist attack, although the case was adjourned on a technicality until October. The relatives are suing Germany, the state of Bavaria, and the city of Munich for what they say was the willful bungling of the airport rescue operation in which all 9 remaining hostages were killed. 2 had already been killed in the Olympic Village. It was only in 1992 that the relatives finally obtained reports of the police operation, which they had sought for 20 years, and which they say prove culpable dereliction of duty. In road accidents yesterday, 3 people were killed and 44 others hurt. In Kiryat Motzkin, the driver struck her own relatives, killing a 3-year-old boy and seriously injuring his brother, while the mother sustained light injuries. The Weather Bureau says to expect less oppressively hot weather. Temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow: Jerusalem and Tel Aviv 18 to 28, Haifa 22 to 29, Safed 17 to 27, Tiberias 22 to 34, Beersheba 20 to 32, and in Eilat from 25 tonight up to 39 degrees centigrade tomorrow. The main news points at this hour: a border policeman was seriously wounded in a clash this morning in Hebron in which a Hamas fugitive was killed. The Ministerial Committee on the Release of Palestinian Prisoners discussed the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, but as yet no decision has been taken. Faisal al-Husseini says more details are necessary before prisoners can decide whether to continue their hunger strike. In Cairo, Israeli and Palestinian teams finished their latest round of talks and acknowledged they will not complete their work by the July 1st target date. Foreign Minister Shimon Peres accuses Likud Chairman Netanyahu of presenting a stolen document to the Knesset, but also of deceit. U.S. President Clinton is to meet later today with the Israeli and Syrian chiefs of staff. Egyptian President Mubarak is threatening to take actions against Sudan if it continues to operate against Egypt. And the weather outlook, cooler. Now a reminder, starting next Sunday, the 2nd of July, you can hear a daily expanded news and current affairs magazine at 6 p.m. here on Reshet Aleph. This new 30-minute program will cover all fields of public interest with the latest news, commentaries, and analysis from our own reporters and the newsmakers themselves. That's at 6 p.m. next Sunday, July the 2nd, on the first wavelength Reshet Aleph 576 and 1458 kilohertz. Our usual 15-minute news report for both local and overseas listeners will be on the air at 7 a.m. There'll be a brief update of the latest developments at 1 p.m., and for overseas listeners, an expanded half-hour current affairs magazine at 10 p.m. on 9435 and 7465 kilohertz shortwave. We'll be back with a late news summary at the end of this broadcast. You're tuned to Israel Radio, Kol Yisrael, broadcasting from Jerusalem.
And now a roundup of Jewish news presented by Ephraim Geffen. French Jewish officials have expressed deep concern that the successes of the far right in the recent local elections in France might lead to them playing a greater role in national politics. A source close to CRIF, the lay leadership body of French Jewry, told the London Jewish Chronicle that this is a turning point in French political history. For the first time in 50 years, an extreme right-wing party has won mayoral seats. Jews and democratic forces will now have to find new ways of putting forward their message, the CRIF source said. Argentine's foreign minister has called on world Jewry to forgive his country for having harbored Nazi war criminals. Dr. Guido Di Tella was speaking in Oxford, England, as the guest of a Jewish students' organization. The diplomat said that his country's past Nazi links were its greatest shame. We owe a profound apology to the Jewish people, he said. Dr. Tella would not deny that anti-Semitism still existed in Argentina, but eradicating it was a key priority. American Jewish organizations have been told by a German government minister that any hint of anti-Semitism at the German National Tourist Office is unacceptable. This follows several incidents originating from the New York branch of the Tourist Office, including the revelation that a 1994 market survey commissioned by the Tourist Office recommends that Jews, blacks, Latin Americans and Asians be discouraged from visiting Germany. Gunther Rexroth, German economics minister, said that even though this remark constituted only one sentence in 750 pages, it is totally unacceptable to me, Gunther Rexroth said. In Britain, a call for greater Jewish and black cooperation was issued by Chief Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs and black member of the British Parliament Paul Boating. The call was made at a cross-community conversation in London recently, co-hosted by the National Black Caucus and the Jewish Council for Racial Equality. Representatives of the two communities are planning a book, an art exhibition, and an oral history project examining shared Jewish and black experiences in Britain and in their wider history. Hungarian Jews have welcomed the re-election of Arpad Goncs as President of Hungary. Erno Lazarovic, spokesman for the Federation of Hungarian Jewish Communities, said that the Jewish community is very happy at the result. He said that Arpad Goncs is interested in Jewish affairs and has never refused an invitation from the Jewish community. A roundup of Jewish news presented by Ephraim Geffen.
Shalom, I'm Sarah Manobla. Welcome to Studio 3. Books, music, and the arts in Israel. Last week, a major exhibition got underway at the Israel Museum, documenting the culture and traditions of the three Jewish communities of India. The rural life of the Bnei Israel Jews, called the Saturday Oilmen because they refused to work on the Sabbath. The Baghdadi Jews of Delhi and Calcutta, who came originally from the Middle East, from Iraq, Yemen, Afghanistan, and the Jews of Cochin in the far south of the Indian continent. This mixed and rich cultural heritage is displayed in the museum's Department of Ethnography in a series of colorful tableaus with clothing, furniture, and artifacts, much of it lent by Indian Jews now living in Israel. Curator Orpa Slepak went to India to research this project, which has been in planning for over 10 years. Filling the museum galleries is the hypnotic sound of Indian music. In one corner, we can see a reconstruction of a village home of the Bnei Israel with primitive farming implements. Then there are the traditional ceremonies, as we hear from Iris Fischoff, Chief Curator of Judaica and Jewish Ethnography.
There is also a beautiful reconstruction of the bridal couple sitting in the manara. That is a bed decorated with a red canopy, and the bride and groom are sitting there receiving their guests during the 7 days after the brachot, after the wedding.
Flora Samuel is the founder of the Indian Women's Association of Lod, where she now lives, one of the leaders of the Indian community in Israel. In Bombay, she was principal of the Eli Kaduri School.
One of our aims is to preserve and present our ethnic, religious and cultural heritage and folklore. So naturally, whenever there is a thing like that, people approach us. So the museum approached us, and we performed many ceremonies and which they videotaped. Now we have got a dance troupe called Anna, which also presented the symbolic demonstration on the day of the opening.
Flora Samuel describes the traditional ceremonies which were reconstructed specially for the exhibition, the Hina bridal ceremony and the Barsa ceremony for a newborn baby.
You see, actually it is not a religious ceremony. It is a social ceremony taken from our neighbors in India. You see, when a boy is born, the brit takes place on the 8th day. So naturally only the Jews come to the synagogue. Now the neighbors want to see the baby. Neighbors want to bring some kind of a presents or gifts to the child. So we adopted this ceremony from the neighbors. That is on the 12th day after the child is born, whether it is a boy or a girl, doesn't matter. We perform this ceremony. We call it, actually it is not called a naming ceremony. It is called the cradle ceremony.
What were your feelings, Flora Samuel, when you came into the exhibition and saw all these artifacts from your own childhood and past?
First of all, I was happy. First of all, I'm really grateful to the Indian community, is grateful to the museum for presenting our culture, ethnic and cultural heritage to the public. Because ours is a very quiet community. Doesn't make a lot of tom-tom, you understand me? So it is a great pleasure. First of all, I was proud to be there. Some of the folklore, in one of the pictures, one of the big pictures, I appear there, some of the other, because that was the ceremony which we had performed in Lud.
Yes.
And, though many things are missing. For example, the oil mill, the symbol of the Bene Israel origin in India, is missing. But I was told that it has actually been ordered from India, but it didn't reach in time. I hope it comes in time, at least a few days more.
The community in Israel, to what extent does the community maintain the culture of their native land?
You see, we have, first of all, I'm talking of the Bene Israel, the Marathi language, the language of Maharashtra, we still speak, we read, we perform plays in that. We have got even a Marathi magazine coming every 4 months. Then the ceremony, like the henna ceremony, is performed in its originality. Even today.
Mm-hmm.
Shidduch is also very much common among our people, particularly living in community centers, like like a place like Dimona, where the community lives together.
Arranged marriages.
Yeah, arranged marriages, but it's happening day by day.
Mm-hmm. You yourself, Flora Samuel, you've been very active in women's education in the community.
Yes, I was the principal of the Ali Kaduri School in Bombay for 9 years. And then here in Israel, I taught in an English school, art school, for 27 years. I'm retired now. But most of my time, free time, was devoted to the women's activities, to organize them, to see how much of our folklore we can preserve for our future generation.
The crowning glory of the exhibition is the interior of a synagogue brought to Israel from Cochin and restored. Iris Fischoff.
It all started 5 years ago when we were offered by a German antiquities dealer to buy the interior of an abandoned synagogue from the town of Cochin. And after the members of the community all immigrated to Israel, the synagogue was abandoned. It was used as a workshop for ropes and mats, and it was practically going to be demolished when this dealer managed to acquire the interior. Now the interior consists of beautiful woodwork, especially the ceiling, the carved ceiling in teak wood, and a gallery from which is a raised bima, a raised reader's platform from which the Torah was read. And with a generous donation of Fred and Della Worms of London, we managed to acquire this woodwork, the wooden parts, and the wooden parts had to be acclimatized to the dry weather of Jerusalem after the tropical and hot and humid climate of southern India. So it took more than 2 years in a sealed room where the relative humidity had to be artificially raised so that the wood will not crack and will not be damaged from the sudden change in the relative humidity. So after a long period of restoration, we discovered beautiful paintings under several layers of paint that were painted over the years. And it was not easy to find the proper place for it in the museum. We practically had to raise the roof of the museum in order to put it in and to install it, and right now it is complete, and we are very, very excited to have it here.
Ruby Daniel was born in Cochin. She's been a member of Kibbutz Neot Mordechai ever since she came to this country 45 years ago. Ruby has memories of the synagogues of Cochin going back to her childhood in India.
There are 8 synagogues altogether in Cochin, not in this town. This town there were 3 synagogues. And one is at the southern end, the other is in the northern end. The northern end is the Paradesi synagogue. And there's one small community in the middle, a different synagogue. Then this Kadambam is on the southern end of the town. It's not a town exactly, it's only a street.
Mm.
And one will not touch the other.
No?
They want to marry. I know that synagogue has something of special value for all the people, not only the Jews, but all the Christians, Muslims, and those who were living around this thing. They also hold the synagogue in awe. They believe in miracles done by the synagogue. So if any child is sick, they bring something to the synagogue, or a glass of oil to burn the lamp. Or anybody is going to for labor, or anybody is going on a journey, they always bring all the, not only the Jews believe less than these Gentiles.
And at the opening of the exhibition, they were there in force, Israel's Indian Jews, from Moshav and Kibbutz, from the towns of Lod and Ramleh and Dimona. Iris Fischoff, what sort of reaction did you notice from these visitors?
Oh, it was thrilling. I mean, they were thrilled. It was very, very moving to watch them walk into the synagogue, touch the parts. One of them told me, I was bar mitzvah in this synagogue. I read the portion from up there in the gallery, and it's invaluable, this connection, the contact between the community and the museum.
The Jews of India at the Israel Museum. And I'm Sarah Manobla, signing off this, the last edition of Studio 3. To all our listeners, Shalom.
Tomorrow at this time, the Sabbath Eve program, Thank Goodness It's Friday.
This is Yehuda Levi, president and publisher of the Jerusalem Post. Day by day, we keep you informed and in touch. And now enjoy a daily bonus. The weekend supplements, the funnies, the New York Times weekly review, the World of Sports, and the Money magazine.
Call now toll-free 177-022-2277 for details of our special subscription offer and free gift.
The Jerusalem Post. We've just made your week even brighter.
This is Israel Radio, Kol Yisrael, broadcasting from Jerusalem. At the top stories, a border policeman was seriously wounded in a clash this morning in Hebron in which a Hamas fugitive was killed. The Ministerial Committee on the Release of Palestinian Prisoners is discussing the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. As yet, no decision has been taken. Faisal al-Husseini says more details are necessary before prisoners can decide whether to continue their hunger strike. And the weather outlook, cooler. The next news in English for local listeners is at 5 p.m. on this frequency. The news and program in French follow. This is Ruben David Miller. Good afternoon and shalom from Jerusalem.
Kol Israel, il est 13h30. Shalom, la seconde édition du journal, au micro, Hélène Paragan. En titre, la commission interministérielle pour la libération des détenus palestiniens a décidé de relâcher plusieurs centaines de prisonniers. Au Caire, les pourparlers israélo-palestiniens sont terminés. Il sera difficile de conclure un accord jusqu'au 1er juillet, mais un accord partiel pourrait être annoncé pour cette date. Israël série, Shimon Peres accuse Bibi Netanyahou d'avoir présenté à la Knesset un document volé à l'armée. Pendant ce temps, à Washington, on est satisfait des entretiens entre les chefs d'état-major israéliens et syriens, et à Damas comme à Jérusalem, tout le monde se déclare encouragé. Un policier des frontières blessé à Hébron au cours d'échanges de tirs avec un terroriste du Hamas qui a été tué. Le président Hosni Moubarak menace le Soudan de représailles s'il poursuit sa politique anti-égyptienne. Enfin, le temps